11-year-old Jaycee Lee Dugard was just like every other person in Myers, California, enjoying a daily routine and living her life. Ironically, the Dugards had moved to Myers because they thought it would be a better and safer neighborhood after being robbed in Orange County. She was going to school wearing her favorite all-pink outfit, walking up her street to the bus stop, not a worry in the world. Meanwhile, Philip and Nancy Garrido drive around the area searching for their next victim. Philip Garrido was a sex offender, having already committed many crimes, including the kidnapping of girls. He kidnapped Catherine Colloway in 1976, holding her hostage in an abandoned storeroom. When he was found and captured, police identified him as a sexually disturbing man and a chronic drug abuser. He admitted to pleasuring himself at the sight of elementary school kids while watching from his car. He was given a 50-year sentence in 1977. There, he met his future wife, Nancy, who had an uncle locked up in the same place as Philip. She was extremely evil and cunning, and would later become his partner in crime. 4 years later, in 1981, they married in prison. It seemed that with his new marriage to Nancy, he had fooled everyone that he was a changed man, and in 1988 he was released from prison on good behavior after only serving 11 years in jail. Philip was strictly monitored by the police, wearing a GPS detector device on his ankle and being often inspected by parole officers, but despite all the risks, he just couldn't control his lust. On that fateful morning in June, Jaycee Lee Dugard was walking on the sidewalk when a car pulled up beside her. Trusting the couple was just asking for directions, she walked up to the open window. Suddenly, Philip pulled out a stun gun and shocked her, sending her to the ground unconscious. Nancy dragged her limp body into the backseat of the car and held her down as they drove away. Unbeknownst to them, Jaycee's stepfather Carl witnessed the whole thing and was about to chase them with his car but couldn't find the keys, so he ran outside and attempted to pursue them on his bike, but it was no use. They were already long gone. In the car, Jaycee wakes to being held down by a strange woman in the back seat, and she distinctly recalls chills running down her spine when she hears the driver say, "I can't believe we got away with this." After a 3-hour drive, she was brought out of the car and into an unfamiliar place. It was the Garrido's house in Antioch, California, approximately 160 miles from the township of Myers from which Jaycee was originally taken. Philip began ordering her to take off her clothes, but she couldn't understand why this mysterious man would ask her to do that. Before she would even do more than utter a few words, however, Philip was forcefully stripping off her clothes. All of them. He then brought her inside the bathroom with him, grabbing a razor and vigorously shaving her lady parts. He then forces Jaycee to please him, after which Philip attached a pair of handcuffs on Jaycee's wrists and brought her into a tiny shed in the backyard. Little did she know, this is where she would spend the next 18 years. Philip came in a few times a day to bring food and water or empty the bucket which she had to use as a toilet. But other than that, there was only Jaycee and the pair of handcuffs in that hot, sweltering shed. Sometimes, Philip came into the shed in a more aggressive mood. Jaycee would come to realize that this was when he came to assault her. She quickly learned through Philip's advice that resistance was futile and that it would only make things worse. As she was getting assaulted, she would describe herself as being in such pain that she felt like she was being split in two. She would also ask herself questions like, "Why is he doing this to me? And is this normal?" Not even knowing how truly messed up the situation was. For a few months, Jaycee would cry herself to sleep. Philip became everything she had. She depended on him for food, water, and even companionship. But above all other things, she would be afraid of the nights where Philip came home high or drunk, knowing that those times were when the assaults would be the most brutal. Over the years, a lot of things changed. Jaycee was impregnated twice, once at 13 and once at 16, successfully giving birth twice without complications. Both of them would grow up barely knowing or having conception of a world beyond the tents and rooms in Philip's backyard. Over time, Philip's psychological influence on Jaycee began to seep in and alter her psyche. She became very humble, dependent, and even sympathetic towards her abductor. When he told his sad stories about how he had a problem he couldn't control and that he needed her help, she felt bad for him and felt that she had to remain there to protect others from Philip's bad side. Philip started a printing business that was fairly successful, and unbelievably, Jaycee was the backbone of his company. Working as his graphic designer and customer service rep, she had access to a desktop, emailing, and a business phone to contact customers and other people regularly. Many clients recall talking to her over the years, but as further proof of the effectiveness of Philip's indoctrination, she never once mentioned or even hinted at her true identity or the kidnapping. As Jaycee grew up and converted into an adult woman, she no longer served to satisfy Philip's demented lust. For once, showing that he was not entirely a sexually disturbed man, he never once touched or violated his and Jaycee's baby girls. But he still, with Nancy's support, frequented the playgrounds and elementary schools from which he could look at children playing. He often asked Nancy to get the little girls to lift up their skirts or spread their legs as he took pictures from his car. During her 18 years of captivity, police had multiple chances to uncover the kidnappings or link Philip to the disappearance. Most importantly, the kidnapping crime was committed near South Lake Tahoe, just a few miles from where Philip had kidnapped his first victim, Catherine Calloway, in 1976. Several leads were discovered early in the search, but none of them led to any conclusion. Examination of the Garridos' backyard after the discovery revealed that all that was protecting the tent maze and Jaycee from the world was an 8-foot fence. Not once did the parole officers discover anything unusual about the Garrido property, even as Philip was charged with several minor drug charges and other petty crimes. Shockingly, parole officers visited and searched Garrido's house over 60 times, but unfortunately never thought to search the backyard. In 2009, Philip's appetite towards the supernatural finally got the best of him. He was always into the idea of other possibility science, but he seemed to have gone off the rails with his final plan. He brought Jaycee and their children to a police department at UC Berkeley to discuss his God's Desire program, featuring how effectively he had been rehabilitated. The officers there naturally found the pale and submissive girl suspicious and ran a background check on Philip, quickly finding out that he was a registered sex criminal on parole for kidnapping charges. The police investigated Jaycee and the children, separating them from Philip. Jaycee, even when asked, still protected the truth about her identity and Philip's sexual desires. She made up a whole alibi and maintained her story right up until the end, when Philip himself cracked and admitted his kidnapping and assault of Jaycee. Even then, Jaycee, who had not so much as said her own name in over a decade, would not say it, and offered to write it down on a piece of paper instead. When asked if she was aware that Philip was a convicted offender, she defended him, saying he's a changed man, a great person, and even that he was good with kids. This shows just how much control Philip had over her, and is a perfect example of Stockholm Syndrome on account of her developing a bond with her abuser. The Garrido property was raided and endless evidence of the crimes was found. Nancy and Philip were quickly arrested and Jaycee was brought back to the real world for the first time in 18 years. So, she reunited with her family and friends and continued to be a wonderful mother to her kids, who were already fast approaching high school age. The life of these real characters changed, so here's what happened next. Nancy Garrido was tried, found guilty, and sentenced to 36 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Phillip Garrido was tried, found guilty, and sentenced to 431 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2011, Jaycee published a book of her experiences in captivity and returning to normalcy, titled A Stolen Life. It's here that she goes into her raw personal experiences in Captivity and this case, and not surprisingly, more than 100,000 copies were sold on its first day of being released. She keeps the identities of her two daughters private and says that most of their friends don't even know what they went through. What shocks me about this case is that even though the three girls had seen the worst things imaginable, they have an extremely positive outlook and are eager to move on with their lives. It blows my mind how Jaycee in particular doesn't show any hate towards Phillip or any bitterness in general. I think this is just another testament to the fact that the human mind is extremely resilient, and the will to survive is so strong in some people that your brain will literally rewire itself to deal with intense traumas such as this. After reading this story, I can honestly say that I'm speechless, so thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I did. If you have one, please feel free to suggest what story I should do next, and with that, I'll see you all in the next video.